here. So we're just going to jump right in. The title of this presentation is Building Your Plane While Flying. The goal is to kind of pull back the curtain on production practices at Bungie, especially over the last 4 to 5 years as we wrapped up Halo 2 and developed our processes over Halo 3 and then into our DLC and our expansion packs. We kind of want to show you guys how we're evolving the discipline of production and maturing it into a pillar discipline within the studio that is really works hand in hand with all of the game team. And so I'll just jump right into it. Kind of want to talk about what the point is. The point of this talk is to show you through some of the pain and the trials and tribulations how we actually developed our team while building Halo 3 with the key point of trying to maintain the culture of the studio. Bungie has a very intense creative culture. We wanted to instill some mature development and production practices within that culture, but not lose the joy and the surprise and the spontaneity of the creation process and allow people to design and do their best work, but still ship it on time. In order to do that, we want to give you a little bit of context, some history. If you look at the credits of Halo 1 and Halo 2, I think there's 1 or 2 producers attributed to those titles. If you look at Halo 3, I believe there's 8. We currently have 11, so we grew our staff a lot. And part of this talk is to kind of show you how we've been able to do that, allow the producers and the APs and the executive producers on the staff to really cover all the disciplines and all the features and all the things that we're trying to do in the Halo games, but not, like I said, destroy the culture. So the role of the producer in Halo 1 and 2 is very different than it is today. They handled a lot of the ancillary tasks. They still worked with the game team, with the lead designers, kind of helping to run the general project. But with just a couple people and with a large staff of 60 to 80 people, there was a lot of things to manage. A lot of things fell through the cracks. And because of that, a lot of the project management was put on the discipline leads. People that are actually doing individual contributor work that had code and content that they had to make for the games are actually managing their projects and spending a lot of time managing the schedule, managing the team, rather than producing work. So we wanted to invest in production. And why do we want to do that? Well, largely because of the Halo 2 experience. My experience at Bungie is I came on right at the end of Halo 2. At that time, I was actually working with the Xbox organization, working on the 360 and Xbox Live. We were in a building right next to them. And I remember during the legendary Halo 2 crunch, I'd see these guys at all hours of the day and night just walking around like zombies in the parking lot taking their smoke breaks. And when I was thinking about working at Bungie, I had to really ask myself, is that a place that I want to be? Is that the kind of environment that I want to work in? And the answer, of course, was yes, but I also wanted to change that. I wanted to help come in and build some production practices, help these guys in the studio, and show them that we can actually ship a game on time, ship a game with all the features that they wanted and not kill themselves. Halo 2 was a big disaster, I would say, in terms of project management. A lot of things were cut at the 11th hour. A lot of personal sacrifice and actual physical pain. People like carpal tunnel syndrome, and a couple guys actually threw out their backs from actually sitting too much, and they were looking for a new solution. And so how do we do this? And this is kind of the overall agenda of this talk. We want to show you 3 pillars that we ascribe to, and they kind of walk through a case study of environment art in Halo 3. So there's 3 things. It's quality first, and there's people first. And I know there's 2 first, but we'll explain that. And then there's being adaptable. So quality. Quality has 3 things that we believe. It's a flexible approach to scheduling, it's a non-negotiable polish, and there's a planned crunch. So the core of the flexible approach to scheduling is we will rip apart the schedule at any time, including extremely late, if we think it's going to make the game better. If it means there's an amazing feature that somebody just thought of that's going to be incredible and we all agree to it, we will readjust everything on the fly. If we think a feature isn't really doing well, through our play tests and the feedback from the design team, we will spend the time to take it offline and rigorously rework it until we make it better or decide to cut it. But we are very flexible in our schedule. Later on in this talk, we'll kind of go into our pre-planning methods, but I want you to know that with this flexible approach to scheduling, there is a long-term plan. There is an overall vision for the project, but within that long-term vision, we are definitely very flexible in the tactics that we use to achieve that. And we work with the team to actually monitor their progress, gather the empirical evidence, and help them to work with their schedule. And we'll explain that in more detail. So one key example is Forge. If any of you have played Halo 3, you probably know what Forge is, but it's a multiplayer object editor. It allows you to go into a multiplayer game and manipulate the objects in the level, do it in real time with other players over live, and really have a fun time. You can change your avatar into Master Chief or into the Guilty Spark, that's the name, and fly around and actually manipulate objects. This is a project that didn't come online until 6 months prior to ship. It was something there was a kernel of an idea really early on in pre-production. People thought, hey, this would be a really fun thing to do. We should have some sort of multiplayer editor. But because of all of the other work in the game, we didn't actually get around to it until just 6 months prior to ship. But it was intriguing enough that we wanted to do it. And so we were able to rework the schedule. We actually had to cut a few small UI features and some other work that we were doing to reroute some of our engineers to make it happen. But really, with 2 or 3 people, we're actually able to ship this feature, less than a year before ship. And so when we consider quality, we also look at other modifiers. And a lot of these will overlap into the people first, and this is why we have 2 first, because we truly do believe that the people and the game quality go hand in hand. So there's 4 things here. We have morale, the employee development, schedules and budgets, and then the fans, people actually play the game. When we think about changing the schedule or changing things for quality, we really look at the whole picture. Is this something that a person on the team really, really wants to do, they're really passionate about, and they're going to put that extra effort into making it happen? Is this something that we think the fans are really going to love? Can we actually adjust our budget and our schedule to do it? And this is something that we think is going to be good for the employee. This will give them an opportunity to do something to grow in this position or to try out other things. And a great example is Save Films. This is an absolute key feature to Halo 3 and a big feature for Xbox Live in general. But we nearly cut this in the last year of production because we just didn't have time. And if not for really 2 people who really, really believed in it and really changed the minds of the entire team and said, we're going to work and we're going to make this happen, we kept it in. And it was one of those things that I think Halo 3 would not be the game it is without it. The other tenet is a non-negotiable polish. I've been to some project management training earlier this week, and we talked about, it was some Scrum training. We talked about hardening sprints. We talked about time at the end of a project for polish. And the way that we sort of approach this is a non-moving component. We finish the game, we have code and content complete, and then we have time to make it better. It's not a contingency plan. It's not a place where you actually do extra backlog work. It's not a place where you fix other bugs. It's just iteration. Take the game as it is and make it better. I say no new content at the end, and there's a gray area there because sometimes an idea will require new content and then we renegotiate it. But really, we have a period of time, approximately 2 to 4 weeks per person, where it's just make the game as good as it can be. And we don't negotiate on that. That's something that we just keep as part of our long-term plan. And if other things in the schedule move, then polish just moves out. It's something we truly believe we won't eat into. The other thing, and this is, there's a couple issues to this one, and it's planned crunch. And we really believe that at Bungie we do crunch, and we have a humane way of doing it. We want to explain how we do that. We do believe it's a tool that can be used for good or evil. And the success of crunch is how you communicate it. We really do our pre-planning up front. We do some very rigorous milestone planning, and then we can know these are going to be points in the project where we're probably going to have to ask people to work a little bit extra. So communicating that is vital to its success. It has to be communicated in advance so people can plan their lives around it, can understand the scope of it, and the scope of the work, what will actually be achieved during that crunch is well defined, and everybody that is going to be involved in it agrees to that work. The timeline is established so people know the extra work hours or how the work is going to be scheduled. And then there's a definitive end. There's either a milestone build or a public beta test or a presentation or something that the team can work towards, and they see this is how it's ending, and they can see their incremental work go towards that end. So this is kind of a no-brainer slide, and I'm sure many of you have experienced it. Crunch can be bad. Most crunch is bad. It's bad, I think, because the things we just talked about don't happen. It's prolonged. There's no goal. People don't know what the heck they're supposed to do. They just know they're there in the middle of the night, and they don't see anything moving forward. If you're a producer and people are doing that, it's your fault. And we truly believe that at Bungie. If a crunch is being mismanaged, it's the producer's fault. And it's also the responsibility of the leads and the people doing the work to actually work with their managers and work with the staff at Bungie to get the crunch back on track. But we believe that the crunch can be positive when it's used sparingly, when it's pre-planned and well communicated, and people understand what they need to do. And a good crunch is a team achievement, right? A bad crunch, if you're a producer, it's your fault. A good crunch, everybody did it. There's actually a lot of positive effects we see in the studio with these small crunches. We just did a couple for ODST and one for another project that were very small. They were 1 month, in some cases smaller, 2 weeks in length, where the hours just went up 10 more hours a week. Things were planned, and it really got the team around these end goals. The morale and the camaraderie goes up. People are working in a shared crisis mode, trying to get work done, and they really enjoyed it. So people first. And now we're talking about crunch. We're going to jump right into the people that we actually had crunching. So Bungie is our people. Without our people, we wouldn't make the games that we've made. And some of you may have heard of Marty O'Donnell, our composer, and he has a story. He likes to bring people into his office and tell the story of the goose that laid the golden egg. If any of you are familiar with that story, there's this magical goose, lays a golden egg. The farmer thinks it's great. He's becoming rich, and he thinks, I want more gold eggs. So he slices open the goose, and what does he find? He just finds the inside of a goose. There's no more gold eggs in there. And Marty likes to tell that story because he really views, and we really view, that as an analogy for Bungie. If we take care of our people, if we take care of our team, they're the ones that will be doing the best work. We can't rip them apart to get more riches out of them, to get more work out of them. We need to actually nurture and take care of that team in order for them to do their best work. So this kind of leads into just some context for how we view producers and the production role at Bungie. This isn't rocket science. This is pretty much, I kind of view it program management 101 kind of stuff. And this actually made me think of this. This is a play. We're up in Seattle, and there's this play going on that got rave reviews. And for all intents and purposes, it should have been a flop. It was an ensemble piece with all these major characters being directed by a brand new director. And it was a hit, and it was amazing. And some interviews with the director, they asked, well, how did you get this amazing performance from your staff? And he said, well, it was easy, or from the cast. He said it was easy. He went back to just very basic theater practices or theater sports, rehearsal practices, just getting the team to go back to their fundamentals, working with each other, going through all of the exercises that he did in college as he was studying theater, but just going back to the basic fundamentals, getting the team to trust each other, to work well with each other, and then ultimately getting an amazing performance out of them. I kind of view the role of producers at Bungie in a similar vein. Our focus is on creating an environment for people to do their best work. And a key thing at Bungie, and I'm just putting this as a line item because I know the title of producer means various things at various companies and various cultural situations. But a producer at Bungie doesn't design. We have designers. Our role is to work with the designers to help them to achieve their goals, offer our feedback as just another member of the studio, because Bungie is a very open environment and everybody has an equal voice in things. But we don't offer our voice about a feature as, I'm your producer, I'm telling you what to do. It's just as a collaborative peer. We don't design. We do definitely contribute to the overall goal of the game, of the project, but we aren't driving that decision. And then we support, in this context of, obviously there's natural tension in the creative process. You have engineers, you have artists, you have designers. We're all working on a similar feature or a game or similar end goal. Everybody brings their own individual needs or impressions into that. And so there's a natural tension in the creative process, and that's good. Producers at Bungie, we assist with that through conflict resolution, getting people to talk, getting people to communicate better, and trying to find the best solution together. And we evolved our processes in Halo 3 because it was apparent that there wasn't any, or not very much, accountability for cross-discipline issues. We saw that coming out of Halo 2, where a lot of the teams were in these silos. We had the artists, we had the designers, we had the engineers, and everybody thought this is how the game should be, and people weren't really working together. As producers at Bungie, our role was to kind of get these people talking in cross-functional groups. Well, actually, before I jump into this, I want to say, too, this getting people to work in cross-functional groups, this is a key thing for how we actually developed the floor plan for our current studio at Bungie. It's an entirely open environment. It's a giant room, bigger than this room where we all sit. And there's no walls. You can stand up and see everybody in the studio. We have all our desks on wheels, and so we really move people around to have people sit near each other and be near each other depending on the phase of the game. I know in the almost 5 years I've been with the company, I think I've moved my desk over 30 times. The producers don't sit together. I mean, I'm sitting right now next to an artist and next to a 3D artist and next to a concept artist. We have other people just sitting up amongst all the different staffs that they work with. We really mix people around, and you know that after a couple of weeks or even a couple of days or sometimes months, you may move again depending on your role or how you need to work with the team. Again, like I said, this stuff isn't rocket science for this section. This is just going back to the basics of, I think, good project management. We have this methodology. It's just listening. Listen to the people. One of the things we want to do to not kill the culture of Bungie and actually come in and institute some more rigorous practices is to actually be a part of the team. Over the last couple of days, talking to some of you about how your studios function, I definitely see that this is similar to how some of you work, but also very dissimilar. A lot of people have this natural distrust of producers or think that we're going to come in and actually tell you what to do or really work for the publisher. At Bungie, we have producers on staff, and it's our best interest is the team and the studio's best interest. We definitely work with the publishing producers whose best interest is for the publisher, and that's great, and that's what a good publishing producer should do. But we definitely want to be part of the team. And so by doing that, we listen, we gather the data, figure out what's going on, and then make the data honest and the process transparent. We're really working to make our project management processes as transparent as possible, and I'll talk about that in the next section. And then we present recommendations. Like I said, producers aren't designers. We work with the team. We gather the data. We show them, hey, this is what's going on, and we work with the creative leads to actually find a solution. With that, we really believe that soft skills are just as important as hard skills, in some cases even more so, right? Understanding context is incredibly important. And hard skills are something that can really be taught. You can take some classes. You can learn how to use Microsoft Project or Excel. Or these are things that can be taught. But just having that innate ability to actually work with people, to understand what's going on, team dynamics, personality conflicts. Some of these skills are innate. They can definitely be learned over time. But we really think that these things are key. And the third pillar is adaptability. And so we kind of wrap this around this idea of just adaptive project management. And I see that, as I learn about other different project management methodologies, this is very similar to, in scope, to some of the things like Scrum, where there's the pillar of inspect and adapt, like finding out what's going on with a problem and adapting your methods to actually solving it. And we actually follow that philosophy too. And I'll talk a little bit about Scrum and how we sort of adopt it. And I've learned the term Scrum But this week. I think we do a lot of Scrum But. We do Scrum But we do these other things. So putting people in quality first means we invest in these processes that are adapted to the people, the teams, how the unfolding view of the game, how things change over the course of the project. And then we use a whole range of methodologies to bring clarity. We have a very large toolbox of skills and technology that we use to actually provide this data. And we'll talk about that too. So we start with a framework. We have a very clear framework for how we're going to build the game. And again, this is kind of project management 101 stuff, but we have to be very clear up front. We look at 6 phases of a game, right? Concept phase, what's the game? The goal of that is just figure out what the heck is it? And that is it inspiring to others? Is it something that we can show the rest of the team and go, hey, this is going to be incredible? We're in the process right now of developing a new IP, and so we're in this concept phase, and the goal is, it's got to be amazing. The rest of the studio has to fully be behind it and think this is going to be the most greatest thing ever, or we won't move into the next phase. And then pre-production is just proving those concepts, finding the fun, thinking what are the gameplay tenets, how are we going to actually test them, and of course, production. And then after that, we have polish, which we kind of isolate out from production. This is, like I said, it's a standalone, non-negotiable phase. Releasing, just getting it shipped. And then prior to releasing, we have our sustained planning. If you look at Halo 3, that took 2.5 years to make, and we're still working on it. We'll probably be working on it for a couple more years. So games don't really end nowadays, especially if there's an online component. Once you're done with it, you're still maintaining it. You're adding things to it. So really adding out this sustained planning. We had a full production team working on DLC, just planning out all of the BungieNet stuff and community outreach. It's a big effort, and so that has to go into your early planning too. Even back in the concept phase, we think about, well, how are we going to carry this game out for 5 or 6 years or 10 years or longer? Just thinking about that up front and actually coming up with plans early so we can think about all of the other necessary evils of production, which are budgets and staff planning and working with the publisher to actually plan out these games on a 7 to 10 year horizon. And because these phases change in the project, the responsibilities of producers change. We have to be able to jump in and work with any group at any time, change the methods that we use depending on the phase of production. And then since we sort of have this fire jumper approach, we really rely on the production team for context. This is, I think, a key difference between how we do things now and in the past in Halo 1 and 2. When there's just 1 or 2 people, there's a lot of things that fall through the cracks, and you really can't manage that or get a lot of information or have a lot of insight into what's going on. Currently, with our staff, we're able to pretty much handle most of what we're doing. And we're working on multiple projects right now. We've really had to build up our production management staff to handle that. And so we rely on each other for context, and we have a lot of producers and teams that work across projects. And we need to work with each other to actually figure out what's going on, because you may be working on a project on one side of the studio when other guys are working on the other side of the studio, but you need to share resources, and we need to kind of understand what the heck's going on. And so we have to talk to each other a lot. And we take a very pragmatic approach, like I talked about earlier. Each team and individual are approached differently, and we adapt our methods depending on that. And we'll jump into some of that next. So first example is environment art versus mission design. Environment art we currently approach in a sequential method. I don't want to necessarily say waterfall, because I think a lot of people interpret waterfall as a very traditional manufacturing method where you do all your planning up front and testing doesn't happen until the very end. We're constantly having tests and reviews throughout the process. It's a very agile approach, but we definitely view it in phases, right? We have our mass out phase, we have architecting, finishing, and polish. But within each of those phases, we have the mission designers that are working on it, just constantly iterating. We have these goals at the end of these phases, these checklists of things that must be met in order to move into the next goal or next phase. But so in order to have these two teams that, environment art's working on this long phased approach, and the mission designers are working on a really fast iterative process. We line up these iterations to coincide on these milestones. So we can get everybody together to go, okay, for the goal for architecting should be that all gameplay geometry should be locked. And so we make sure that the mission designers have been able to actually place in encounters, test them and go, yes, all of these spaces are fun. I've mapped out all of the combat that I'm going to have for this space, and we can lock it. And then the architect during that time has been working hand in hand with the mission designer to modify the geometry to make the best space possible. Once we've accomplished that goal, we then move into the finishing phase where the artist is starting to make the level more beautiful, adding more detail to it, while the mission designer continues to iterate, but the general pace of the combat is for the most part locked down. Another one is concept art versus 3D art. The key here is that with concept art, a lot of the work gets front-loaded, right? They have to make images and make the concepts so the 3D modelers can actually model it. The problem with that is that we have these holes in their schedule where they do some concept work up front. The phases of actually developing that model take much longer than some of these artists. Sometimes it takes a while for the concept art, of course, to gel and coalesce onto something that we want to create. But generally, it takes less time than the phases for 3D modeling. So we end up having these holes in their schedule. So really, we want to be able to isolate where are those holes, because there's other needs for concept art. We need them to do environment paintovers, do marketing materials, etc. So it's just isolating out where those holes are and how we can schedule other work that affects other disciplines. The other thing is system design versus engineering. So the way that we approach it is that we have system designers that own systems like online matchmaking, what we call the sandbox, which is just our weapons and vehicles and how they interact all together within a mission, within a physical space. We kind of stair-step these approaches where we have a lot of the design work done up front. We have design docs and we have reviews, which are essentially functional specs that we give to the engineers and have the engineers agree, yes, we can build this and this will be what the designers want. And then we move into the next phase where engineering actually starts building that task, and they have some more iterative approaches where we have walk-up time where they figure out, well, how am I going to actually build this? And then actually thinking about their work, helping to build their own engineering schedule, and then doing those specific tasks, and then fixing the bugs, so that in the next phase, for prototype 1, the system designer has something they can work with. This is a great example for how we do AI, for example. We have a creature that we want to move in a certain way. They write the design document for how they want movement in combat to function. The AI engineers actually make the systems for the designers to actually start prototyping these things. And so we do it in a stair-stepped approach, and we line them up in different phases so that we can actually go to the next slide, which is we try to line things up across disciplines into milestones. And the key here is that the way we approach this is that milestones aren't always, or I should say for the most part, are never really date-driven. They're very feature-driven. We figure out what are we trying to achieve here. Of course, there are some date-driven aspects, right? The Halo 3 public beta, we had an agreed launch date with Microsoft. There may be publisher meetings or things like that. So there are these times where we have a date that we need to hit, but within the general production cycle, we try to make these milestones as meaningful to the team and not necessarily as meaningful to the calendar. So a big example here is first playable, which is, for us, is we want to be able to actually play through either the entire game or a large chunk of it, maybe the first third or the first half. So figuring out, okay, that means, if it's a 10-mission game, we want the first 5 missions, nearly done or completely done with architecting, so we can actually go through and play all the combat and then have all of the supporting art assets and engineering work done to do that. And then we slice off that as a milestone. That may be something that we do. We plan these things out early on in advance and to kind of isolate out where we think there may be crunches and communicate those early on. One of the things I should mention, too, is when I talked about having a framework or a plan early on, we do a lot of our work backwards as producers. We actually go, okay, if we're thinking about this game, the publisher may want it to come out in 2007, maybe in September 2007. And we go, okay, well, we know it takes this much time to actually get it from manufacturing to market. We know this is how long it takes to manufacture. We know how this is the time it's going to take to actually test with the publisher, and just work backwards and go, well, these are our key dates. Do we think we can actually hit that? In the end, we understand that the numbers are all magic at that point. They're not really real. But it allows us to have a framework that we can actually sit down with the team, sit down with the publisher and go, well, this is what we think the general plan will be. And this is the point where I want to stress that it's been really great for us to have a larger, more integrated production team, because we can act as a really good buffer for the staff and the publisher, and really it's helped us actually be able to dedicate more time to work more closely with the publisher, because we actually now have a very, despite everything you might have read, we have a pretty good and open relationship with Microsoft. We currently, like on ODST, have let them know, like, this is the schedule, and some of these things we don't think we're going to achieve, but right now these are our best numbers we're going to have, and we're constantly talking to them and letting them be a part of that process. So then when things do happen, and of course things happen, as you all know, they're invested, they own the process, they have the data to back it up, and they've seen the progress so far, and there's a good solid relationship and trust, so that when we actually have to have those difficult conversations about maybe moving dates or cutting features, they go much, much easier. So like I mentioned, meaningful milestones, they're feature-driven. And just making sure that the team understands this is what you're working towards. This is what is going to happen. This is the task list for each of you. You know the work that you are responsible for. And on that, everyone in the studio has a schedule. Even if they don't think they do, they do. We believe, and I say believe, that all creative tasks will be quantified. I say believe because we're not there yet. I'm not saying we quantify all tasks. But we really do believe that the creative approaches for the designers can be quantified in some respect. We do a lot of R&D. Like I said, we're working on a new IP right now. We're spending a lot of time just doing R&D, and so trying to figure out, well, how do we actually build out a schedule? Because you don't want to just have your staff out thinking about something for 8 months and not really knowing what they're working on. So trying to build out a framework for research and development. Figuring out, this is probably an appropriate time frame for actually doing some lighting research. And then having achievable goals or deliverables at the end of each of those phases. Like, I'm going to submit a research document to the rest of the engineering staff to show them this is what I'm thinking, so that we can then debate it and move on to the next phase. And the key here is that we make this viewable to everyone on the team and make it as transparent as possible. And this has a lot of benefits, right? First of all, it gets everybody riled up, and that means they're talking. So it increases communication, gives them visibility, and then increases accuracy because they can say, hey, this isn't exactly the work that I think I need to do. I see that you have me doing tasks A through C. Well, really it should be C, A, and B. And then it allows us to be a little bit more accurate because they take ownership and involvement in making their schedule. They're accountable to it now. And then greater efficiency because we're able to actually get this information out to them. They can see it, review it, work with us, and not just have this be done in a black box where suddenly at the end of a milestone we're expecting something from them and they didn't know that they were supposed to do it. And so the way we manage that is that we have some flexible scheduling technologies. And we'll next couple slides I'll talk to you about how we approach managing this data. And then talk about some of the things that we're looking at towards the future and which I hope to actually discuss with a lot of you offline about the ways that you guys are doing this. But we really believe that we need to have multiple inputs. We have a lot of people managing information in the studio. A lot of people do pen and paper, carrying a notepad around, writing stuff down. People doing it in Excel, Microsoft Project, any other way that they can write down what's going on and kind of quantify the work or the information that's occurring in the studio. And then we need to unify it. We need to put it into a single data source so that we can manage it appropriately so that we can then make a single targeted output. And actually, here is a unified schedule for everybody in the studio. And then we can actually do reporting to allow us to see trends and behaviors. So our current underlying tech is it's a homegrown proprietary system where we allow the multiple inputs, right? People paper Excel, some people like myself, I just work directly in Microsoft Project. We end up putting everything in a series of project files, and then we have a script that just outputs it or processes it into a database. That from there we can do some reporting on, but then the end result is we actually make a web page for every individual, and we just put it as an active desktop item on their monitor so that when they come into work, they just see these are the tasks that I'm going to work on this week. From there's multiple views. From there, they can look at anybody else's schedule. They can look at overall tasks for everyone on the team, everyone in their discipline, and just leaves it open. So if you're dependent on work from Bob, you can actually look at Bob's schedule and go, well, hey, I see that the thing that I need him to do isn't going to happen for 3 more weeks. And then we can have a discussion about that. But we allow people to actually see those dependencies, see how all the information is related. But because it's a homegrown tech, we are looking at a lot of other things, and I would invite a conversation with you guys about what you're doing. But we're looking at further integration into our art and environment pipeline tools. We have a lot of proprietary tools that we use since we have our own Halo engine that we're working with. We actually want to integrate our tool set more into the tools that the rest of the team uses. But we want to have the core philosophy remain the same. We want to be able to be really flexible on how we input that information and output it in a single method. Let's give you some context, for why we've needed to have a lot of technology to manage it. Just kind of show you the growth of the production staff and the coverage over like a 4-year period, basically. So early on in Halo 3 pre-production, there were 3 producers. We had a team of about 75. This is when I started with the team. And you see some arrows here. There's some long arrows, which means at that point we felt that those disciplines or those areas of the game were being really fully covered. As you can see, we have there's UI, 3D art, multiplayer design, multiplayer environment art. So really, we were working on the Halo 3 multiplayer game at that point. We had a little bit of coverage. Those half arrows on the rest of the game. And Halo 3 is much more than just the multiplayer component. But really, at that point, we could see we're doing really well in multiplayer, but there's a lot of areas where we just had no idea what the heck was going on. And at that point too, we were slammed. We were working really hard, and we realized, well, we can't do it with just 3. So we grew. Midway through production, and I'll say right after this, we'll go into this case study about this point in the project. The team increased to over 100 people. We doubled our production staff. We added on some associate producers. And we were able to get more coverage. We still weren't fully being covered, but we started to really focus on the campaign and the mission design and the campaign environments. And then where we are today, working on DLC and ODST, some other projects, and just sustaining Halo 3, we're at about 11 plus some TBHs, and we're over 150 people in the studio. But at this point, we think we have pretty full coverage for working on multiple projects. And this has been a real shift in how we've done the work at Bungie, actually moving from a single project studio to a multiple project studio. We've had to really invest in building a core centralized production team to kind of manage that and support all of the work. So we want to talk about a big example in Halo 3. And like I mentioned early on, Halo 2 was pretty bad for the team in the sense that they worked really hard and they did a lot of amazing work. And at the very end, a lot of their hard work had to get cut, and it was a big morale hit for most of the team. And we didn't want to have that happen for Halo 3. So we knew that we needed to actually exercise some more rigor with how we're doing the planning. But as you saw in those previous slides, our staff was growing, and our coverage wasn't all it should have been early on. So we had this problem kind of in the middle of production. Campaign environment art, and this task here, was, like I mentioned earlier, is just to listen. Some artists felt the schedule was off. We had kind of two groups of people saying, I don't think I can do all this work, and other people saying, well, we just sucked it up and we shipped Halo 2. We can do anything. We're going to crunch right through it. We definitely knew that we didn't want to do the latter, and we weren't quite sure about the first quote, but we knew that the truth was somewhere in there. So we listened, right? We listened to all the people complaining and talking about the problems they're having. And then working with them, we developed a much more rigorous approach to doing mission audits, which I know, this is kind of a given for anybody that's working on a game. You're constantly reviewing the game, walking through it, looking at things. We've done that at Bungie in the past, but not with, I think, the scheduling rigor that we're applying to it now. We actually sit through and we do an evaluation of the art and design of each level, walk through it, we name every space, we look at every area, and it's the team, I should say, it's the designers and the artists actually running this meeting, walking through it, and we have a producer there, just sitting there, just writing down every task that people are saying, well, we got to do this, I got to change the textures here, we got to add some decorators here, we got to change this geometry here, and just isolating it all out, and at the same time asking people just to give their guesstimates on how long they think it's going to take. Oh, a day here, 2 days here. We've got to do the lighting for this area. That's 6 days. Because at this point, we had no historical data. We're coming in from Halo 2, where we had no information on how long it really took anybody, like no real data. We had a lot of anecdotes. We had a lot of war stories, but we couldn't really look back and go, okay, we can actually see when you started on task and when you actually finished it, so we know this is approximately how long it takes this person to do that work. So we actually had to go through this process of building this data. So we just did a very, very extremely rigorous mission audit for every mission in the game, just to walk through and go, really, where are we at? So at the end, obviously, we were overbooked. We saw that, a year out, or just slightly more than a year out, there wasn't enough time to actually do the work. And there's some, traditional levers you can pull. You can add time. We couldn't really add time. At that point, we had agreed to a launch date. I don't think it had been publicly announced, but we had agreed to a date, and we wanted to stick with it. We could add staff, but, that doesn't really help. And also, our hiring curve wasn't that fast. So even if we did open heads, I don't think we could have filled them in time. The other thing is reduced scope, so that was the obvious thing that we looked at. So we ended up cutting a lot of things, and we'll talk about that. We cut an entire campaign mission. It's called Guardian Forest. And a lot of work and effort went into this. It was fully masked out, near architect and complete. A little bit of it exists now as a multiplayer map in Halo 3 called Guardian. This is a concept art from it. We also merged two smaller missions into the Cortana mission at the end of the game. Cut out large sections of Salvo Highway. And then Guardian Forest, since it was a forest with these platforms that you traverse, we created the flying vehicle, the Hornet, to actually do that. We thought the Hornet was really fun, so we wanted to keep that in the game, and so we added sections to Citadel to account for that. And then there's some sandbox cuts. Like I mentioned before, the sandbox is our character and weapon and vehicle interaction. We had this character called the Guardian that floated around, and you could fight him. And the idea was that you could rip off his eye, and you'd have a laser eyeball that you could hold and shoot things. But we ended up cutting that because that was supposed to live in the Guardian Forest. So we cut a lot of stuff. And you may be asking yourself, well, okay, yeah, great. You cut a lot of stuff. Isn't that just the same as Halo 2? Well, the key difference here is that we actually had a really empirical process this time. It wasn't getting down to the last minute and going, oh my gosh, we have to ship in a month. We're not done, so let's just cut everything. We actually went through this process of adding some empirical data, talking to the team, allowing the team to make that final decision about what's going to get cut. And the key here is that it was a positive result. It was made much earlier. It was made more than a year out before the end of the game. The end result is it gave us a realistic schedule that everybody believed in. Now that we had some base estimates from everybody doing the work, they had a task list that they could see and that they felt that they could actually accomplish. It was the first time in the history of that project that we actually had a full end-to-end. Here are the things that an individual knows they need to do in order to ship this game. And that was actually, we had a lot of hand-wringing over that. We didn't think, especially some of the artists, wouldn't like that. But actually, quite a few of the key people that we thought would hate this came up to us later and said, this is just great. I love knowing what I need to work on. And everybody believed in it. And then it provided some constraints that allowed people to go, okay, I know these are the missions we're going to make. And so we're going to have time to polish them. We're going to have time to make them really good. And then it began this, like I said, this empirical process of transparency. We have data now. We have their estimates. Now we can track against their estimates, and we can help see, okay, so if Joe is saying this task takes 5 days, now we can see it actually takes 7. So next time we have to do that task, we can talk to him about, it really takes 7. It's not something to go, hey, Joe, you have to actually do it in 5. It's just now we know this is what it takes. So we can actually plan out the schedule. It's something that we don't use as a measure to shame or coerce people into actually doing things faster. It's just we want to be realistic. If a task takes 7 days, it takes 7 days. So quick recap. So coming back to this philosophy, right? Philosophy about production at Bungie. And this is kind of the key thing. I mean, we spent the last 4 years actually building up the staff and trying to actually work with the rest of the team that pre-existed and help grow the team and show them that, producers are your friends. We want to do the same thing that you do. We want to make a great game. We want to work with you, and we're going to help you do that, and we're going to help you do it in a humane manner, and we're not going to have you kill yourself to do it. We want to create these conditions for you to do your best work. And then the approach that we use is as varied as the people we work with. Another takeaway I hope you get from this is we're building this process. We're evolving it. And we hope to mature it. Maybe in a couple of years we'll do another talk, which will be entirely different. But we're really looking at all these different methodologies that other studios use, that you guys use. We'd love to hear what you do. But we really want to find a good way that actually works for our culture. And this is one of the things that I really believe in, and I think the rest of the staff really believes in, is that the culture trumps the methodology. We want something that allows the staff to be as creative and crazy and fun as possible and make games. I mean, making games is fun. Making games is incredible. We want to be able to achieve that. But we also want to have some structure around it so we know what you're responsible for, you know what you're supposed to do, and can be held accountable to it and can be and responsible for building that for yourself. So we have these kind of 7 principles that I think are unique to Bungie. We have a creatively led studio. We support the creatively led studio. We put quality and people first. We think those things go hand in hand. It's not one over the other. Producers, we're as flexible as possible. We try to adapt as much as we can. We pride ourselves in applying any methodology as appropriate, so we try to learn about all these different methodologies because I really do think that there are homes for things like Scrum and Agile and Lean and even Waterfall in some cases and other methodologies within Bungie. We're trying to figure out a way that we can actually apply them all or see what makes the best sense. Another key thing is the schedule is a means to an end, not the end itself. We really try not to be date-driven. Of course, we have a long-term plan. We end up locking on ship dates, and we really pride ourselves on shipping on time. I know Halo 3 actually came in a week early. But we also try to let the team know that the schedule is a means to an end. It's just this is, we'll be as flexible as possible in trying to achieve the feature goals of that game. And then we empower the team to take ownership of their work, ownership of their schedule, and be really involved in that, in the production discipline itself. Like I mentioned, we still set these dates and we try to ship on time. We try to wrap all of this up into a way that we can actually, create an end product. So, any questions? Thanks. I think we have a microphone up here if any of you have questions, if you want to. If you could say your name too when I think they're recording it.
Sure. Hi, my name's Dimitri Detsridis. My question is, early on in the presentation you mentioned that during your managed crunch sessions you add approximately 10 hours a week or you have a certain specification for the amount of hours a week you add.
Yeah.
What's your baseline hours a week?
Oh, that's good. Well, baseline is so the question is, we add extra time into our crunch. What's our baseline? Our baseline is approximately 40 to 50 hours. Kind of it depends on the individuals, but generally we have our core hours which map to 40 hours a week. We ask people to in crunches to go to maybe 50, sometimes 55 or 60 if needed. But and then we have so we just extend the core hours. But even then, there is some flexibility to that, where people still come in later, maybe stay later, or come in early and change at different times. It really depends on just having a core hour block, so we know that everybody working on the project is there. And then we have sometimes required weekends, but then that's fully supported with meals and everything else. And yeah.
Do you have a ceiling past which you will not go?
We try not to go past 55.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
I should say not try. We don't go past 55. But that said, there's another thing too. It kind of goes back with the ownership. I think if people are really and take ownership of the work they're doing, I mean, they want to make a great game, right? And if somebody is actually working longer hours and taking that extra time, we're not going to stop them. Some guys say, hey, I really want to make this multiplayer map look really great. I think I'm just going to come in this weekend and work on this thing. It's like, yeah, that's great. And actually, we try to help coordinate their efforts. We say, okay, Frank's going to be in this week. Can we have another engineer that might have time to come in and support him if he has questions, or somebody at least check their email to see if he has a problem? We try to coordinate those efforts. But I think we've actually really seen that as people have ownership of their schedule, they actually end up putting in that extra 10% to make it better.
I have sort of two related questions. On the production side, how do you schedule the producers and make them accountable? And then related, for your internal tools like script to web and that kind of cool stuff, do you have a producer that's sort of also a tech guy, or does he have to use a coder? And then if so, how does that get scheduled, because you're taking game time and making production time and that kind of stuff?
Okay, so the first question was, do the producers have a schedule, and how do we maintain that? Producers don't really have a task schedule, like time-related tasks. We definitely have a massive list of to-do items. I'll just say that's something that we kind of do peer reviews. We look at everything, and I look at the other senior producers, and I kind of show them, these are all the things that I'm taking care of. Help me figure out if there's anything missing. We also we meet with the leads on a regular basis, and we maintain what we call risk logs. We just talk about these are the risks in the project, right? One risk recently was an employee got hurt, so he's out for a couple weeks. It's extremely unfortunate. So what do we do to fill in that time while he's gone? And just talk about that. And we track those risks. And then we meet on a weekly basis to go, what have we done? Have we been able to move people's schedules around? And from that, we actually break out a lot of action items or tasks for us to take care of. So then I have my list of things that I need to go resolve that day. And then does that answer your question? There's
that part, and then there's the support part. Because you're writing scripts that take the Excel or project to web, and
right.
You probably have other plans for things you
want
to do.
Yeah, so the question is, do we code our own? Do we have a producer on staff that's actually writing these tools? We do have somebody on the production staff, one guy, whose sole job is to maintain those tools. We're actually looking at how to fold that back in, like I said, into our general tool structure. But it is, many of us, like myself, come from an engineering background, and we do contribute to that. But we definitely have one dedicated person on staff who's part of that 11 right now.
Do producers at Bungie crunch along with the employees?
Yes, yeah. Do producers crunch with employees? Yes, we do. If our staff was there, we're there too. We're there to support them, even at really crazy hours. Thankfully, we have an automated tool that helps us order food, so we're not doing all the food deliveries ourselves, which is great. So it allows us to actually spend more time, at the studio than at the Mexican restaurant.
So it automatically orders pizza?
What's that?
So it automatically orders pizza?
And better food.
Cool.
Hey, in the schedules you're showing, it looked like there was an emphasis on bug fixing at the end of the project, and I assume that couldn't possibly be the case, that there must be bug fixing throughout the project.
Yeah.
But in that you're using MS Project, how do you track bugs and tasks and have them in one place for developers to work on?
That's a great question. The question is, we're tracking tasks in Microsoft Project. How do we track bugs? Do we use Project? The short answer is we use an entirely different tool. Right now, since the games we're working on are with Microsoft, we use an old Microsoft database called RAID, which this is actually something that we're trying to figure out how we solve, because there's this part in the process where we switch from an individual having tasks in the schedule to they have bugs now to fix. And there is this sort of overlap where we have testers start looking at their content before we hit content complete, for example. So an artist may still have tasks they're doing, but they see their bug list piling on, and there's this, they feel this pressure of, well, what do I work on? This is something we're trying to actually resolve right now. We don't have a really good solution for. We are, like I said, we're looking at different tools that maybe have a unified interface. But there is a certain point where we do shift gears. It's like you're done doing content now, and now you're fixing bugs. And then we also do iterative bug fixing throughout, but throughout the entire process and the entire project. And then at the very end, there is this sort of, content and code complete is done. And now we're just playing the game and testing it constantly to see what other things have we missed along the way.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to do that integration as well. And if anyone figures it out, it'd be great to do a talk on it.
Yeah, I would like to know about that too.
So understanding that across many different disciplines, there are different ways to deal with different personalities. How do you prepare your teams in pre-production process to deal with these potential dysfunctions that may occur in a team?
Yeah, so that's a hard question to answer. This question is, correct me if I'm wrong, just how do we prepare the teams with some of the potential personality conflicts that may arise as we move into these production phases. So one of the things here, and this is actually something that we work really hard at Bungie to differentiate, is that producers I'm not your personnel manager. If I'm working with an art team, I'm not their manager per se, but a lot of those duties sort of overlap. A lot of people come to me and bring to me managerial issues. Those things are actually impediments to them doing their work, so it's my responsibility to help unblock them. To do that, I need to work with them and their personnel manager to achieve that. As we actually, build out our teams within the studio to work on projects, we definitely look at sort of the personality profile, the makeup of the team, which people we think would probably be best for this phase. We definitely look at like in our seating arrangement, and believe me, it takes months to because we often do change our seating like throughout the entire studio, but it takes weeks and weeks and months of just iterating that seating plan, because it's always, well, we don't want this guy next to that guy, etc. Because of their work habits, or maybe there might be some personality conflict. But and these are things that they'll never go away, right? You get two people in a room, there will be a conflict at some future point. So there's no magic bullet to it, but it's something that we are constantly involved in, and we really try to be aware of that line between being a producer and being a personnel manager.
Since Halo 2, you've grown your production staff tremendously. I was curious, what exactly is the structure of your production staff? Do you guys share the responsibilities across the departments, or do you guys focus on different departments or different groups?
Yeah. So the question is, what's our production structure? So it's pretty much all of that. We have one head of production that kind of manages our whole thing, and he's on our business team, and it kind of helps to run the studio and some of the operations of the studio. Within that, we have a handful, I think 3 or 4 senior producers, and that we vacillate between being a lead producer on a project or being an executive producer on a project. So at various times you may be acting as a leader, acting as an EP, but you're essentially a senior producer, and you will vacillate depending on the project. So I've worked as a lead on a project, and then I just as a line producer, and so it changes. But we definitely have we have our head of production, we have our development manager, which is the guy that works on our tools, and then we have I think 4 senior producers, and then several regular producers and some APs. We're actually looking to increase our AP staff.
Cool.
Yeah. And I should say too, some of them are isolated to disciplines. Like we have a couple guys. One guy just working on animation that's supporting multiple projects. One guy working on engineering who needs some help because it's a large engineering team working on multiple projects. And then some people like myself, where I am just working with a cross-discipline creative team right now.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, man, thanks for sharing. You mentioned that communication infrastructure, or communication and transparency, was really important. What kind of touch points from production external to the team and from a communication standpoint do you have? So like weekly meetings and email distribution lists and that kind of thing. And then with internal, with production, what kind of touch points do you have from producer to AP, like weekly or daily scrums and weekly reports and that kind of thing?
Right. So by external, do you mean like
from production to the whole team?
To the
so
whole
how
team.
do you keep everybody kind of marching toward that weekly or monthly goal?
Yeah. So we definitely do. We publish out our meeting notes after meetings. We do weekly and monthly status updates on our areas, and overall, monthly, hopefully monthly. Sometimes it goes longer, just larger project updates that go out to the entire studio. Like I said, we're working on multiple projects, so you may not know what this other team's doing, but you know that generally every month or every 2 months you'll get a big email of what's going on. We also, when we just send out our notes about meetings, we send them to all the producers, so I can just add I just constantly getting spam. Just these are the other things that are going on in the studio. So you kind of end up creating this awareness of what's going on. We definitely use email to publish that out. We end up like I'm currently, and I know some other producers, we're actually starting to put all of our notes in OneNote and just a shared notebook that's open. So if people want to see what's going on, they can just go to this OneNote notebook and see everything that's in there. That's actually been really good for us right now. We're looking at ways of maybe expanding that, and that's been relatively new. Maybe in the last 6 months we switched to doing that. As far as working with the producers, or internally, definitely producers working on a team are pretty much in constant communication. I talk to the couple of producers that I work with on my project right now multiple times a day. I think it's just, but because we have this open space, I just see that he's at his desk and I walk over. We definitely have official weekly, we're going to get together and talk about stuff. But oftentimes I find out that when we get to that meeting, we've kind of talked about everything. So it turns out to be just a 15-minute meeting. In some cases we do move teams into using Scrum and having daily stand-ups. And even just generally, right now I'm working with a pretty small R&D team, and we just have a daily stand-up. It's not an official Scrum, but we just go in every day in the morning and just find out what's everybody working on and look at stuff. So like I said, we use all sorts of different things.
Cool. Thanks.
Hi. You touched on it a little bit earlier as far as scheduling for emergencies or covering for emergencies like somebody gets hurt or something like that. What other strategies do you have, especially for things that are coming for, like, say, maternity leave, paternity leave, things like that?
That's a really good question. So how do we account for these sort of time hits that happen? Looking at our overall schedule and looking at the holidays and the paid vacations and things that we provide, we've been able to break down that there's about 18 work days a month that a person's in. So that's what we sort of calculate on. And then we actually, part of communicating in advance with Crunch is we really communicate to people, hey, these are the phases of the project. These are when we think your work is going to be really important. So you may think about how you're going to schedule your vacation, and we try to get that as far enough in advance as possible. There's it's not one of those questions where there isn't a magic bullet to it. It's just we're constantly bugging people. Actually, we have a tool where you can go in and request a vacation, and oftentimes, maybe once a month or every other month, I'll just go in and know, especially around the holidays, that people are going to take some time off. I just go in and go, hey, I see these guys that I'm producing, they don't have vacation time put in, and I just bug them. Are you going to take off for Thanksgiving? Are you going to do something? You might want to put that in. We plan for that. So we're kind of trying to be forward-thinking and planning for that. But there are emergencies, like somebody gets hurt or somebody's out. Those things, we do have some padding that we try to put in the schedule just to account for those things. Mm-hmm. It's really minimal, and we don't have a set process for that, but it's something that that's something that you need to get better at. Those things, those emergencies still pop up. I still, right now, we do have a guy out, so we're trying to figure out how we're going to adjust things. But because we can actually see everything that people are working on, we can prioritize it. We can just say, these are some lower priority items that this other guy will just take off his plate, and we'll have him take on this other person's work in addition. So because we have everything laid out, we can actually make those decisions and compare tasks to each other.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah. I think this is probably the last question.
How far in advance do you task the team, and how far do they see how far in advance they are? Because you mentioned that they have tasks and that sometimes they get piled up with bugs. Do they see a month, 6 weeks? How far in advance?
So by default, what we kind of push out to their desktop is what they're working on that week. But they can go in and they can see every task they have scheduled out. So we actually had a situation where we had some people working on one project, and we were already pre-planning to get them onto another project in a couple months, and then just putting in some estimated tasks for them that go out for a couple of years. They could go in and go, oh, look, I got 6 years worth of work. That's awesome. That could be a downside to the transparency, but we try to let people just see everything. We let them know, well, this stuff that's 2 years out or a year out or even 6 months out, is very unrealistic at this point. We're just trying to come up with estimates, and it shouldn't be anything that they didn't already know about. We had talked to them before. We're thinking about putting you on this project next. We're talking about the tasks. They know it's there, but they know that this process, we start with these very large estimated swaths, and over time we get more realistic and more granular. So we were really open about just letting it be fully visible. And if we have somebody that has tasks that go out for several years, they'll see that. The good thing is they know they have employment, so it's a positive side.
Thanks.
So anyway, thank you, everybody.